Hey Copper Nerds, I thought it might be fun to see what collectors were talking about 100 years ago or so regarding 1794s. So let's get into this Chapman book and find out what they were talking about. So my buddy Thomas sent me a link to a reprint of the Hudson Chapman book titled The United States Cents of the year 1794. These little reprint books are great. You can get some cool old auction catalogs in this format, and you can also get just some cool old publications. They're published by Forgotten Books. Let's take a look there. And what I thought I would do is jump into the beginning of this Chapman book, and I'm actually just going to read a little bit to you. It was published in 1926, and one thing that's interesting is he does catalog 6 different Headstyles and had his own numbering system, not the Sheldon system. I went through and made some hasty notes. These aren't perfect, but they're going to guide me through the video. I tried to line up the Chapman numbers with the Sheldon numbers, pull out a nice example of each from my collection, and then just show you sort of some of how the crossover is and identify the 6 different Headstyles that Chapman talks about in his book. So let's get started. I don't know, I'll read to you instead of you reading along with me. Let's do that. So, the cents of 1794, with their varied heads of liberty, possess an artistic interest, for they are each from dies engraved directly in the metal by the hand of the engraver. These dies were not made from hubs or punches, with the head in relief and then impressed in the die, which permits of a great number of dies being made exactly alike. Let's stop there for a quick second, because we know, again, the evolution of our knowledge as people like you and me, and in this case, Bill Eckberg, research what's out there and make new discoveries. And what Bill discovered is that they were indeed hubbing portions of the devices even back in 1793. So for a Liberty cap, this article doesn't touch specifically on 1794s, but generally what we were seeing was this. The head and the cap itself were hubbed into a die. There was a working hub in relief. It was pressed into a die in cuse, and then of course the coins struck with the in cuse die were in relief again. The hair details were all hand engraved. That is true. Much of the face was hubbed, but then touched up. You're still going to get variation between heads, but the hub itself would have been in use in 1794. So let's just note that we have additional info there, but get back into Chapman's introduction. The cents of this year, therefore, have a decided charm. They are all of one design, that of the Liberty Cap cents, which were executed near the end of 1793. In the latter part of 1793, Joseph Wright, the first or one of the first draftsmen and die sinkers of the U.S. Mint, died. On November 23rd, Robert Scott received his appointment as engraver of the Mint. His entry into the service is marked at once by the introduction of a new and more beautiful type of United States cent, the cent known as the Liberty Cap type, with the bust of Liberty, the flowing hair, which is treated artistically in the mass, facing right and bearing over her left shoulder a cap on a pole. The rarity of the piece in all the 3 different dies known would coincide with the brief term left of that year after his appointment. He was undoubtedly the engraver of the cents of 1794, especially of the first type, which are similar in treatment to those of 1793. It is difficult to attribute to Scott all of the subsequent dies of the year, for the feeling of the artist's work is entirely different, and we seem to sense the style of other hands. But this difference may have been due to his endeavor to work down to a lower plane of relief, or to satisfy a public taste for detail in the hair. So great is the difference that when we compare specimens in an early group with another group, it would almost make one think they must be from a different hand. But when we arrange them closely, following each other in treatment, we seem to find a gradient of style of execution, and that they probably from the same hand, and the artist has gradually developed or degenerated from the earliest type, like the 1793, through a variation in treatment and feeling that continues until we reach the 6th style, which is hard and mechanical in execution, with a flat modeling of the cheek and follows and resembles the preceding group only in the large mass of hair at the back of the neck. The treatment of this termination of the hair, which is freer in all preceding dyes, is copied in these latest specimens as closely as possible after the preceding dye. The same styles continued in 1795. There is a revival of his earliest style in the Liberty Cap scents of 1796. There is no mention of an assistant engraver until 1807, and careful study of the series and recognition of the variation in treatment of the design shows that they may be arranged into 6 styles. Let's talk about the 6 styles. What's kind of fun is that they really do follow emission sequence between Chapman and Sheldon for the first 3 styles. When we get into the 4th, we have one oddball, and then the 5th is jumping around a little bit as well, and the 6th, again, pretty consistent with that head of 95. Now, Chapman does include some varieties that are NCs in the Sheldon numbering system. I'm not going to get bogged down on those. But what I do want to do is just read to you each of the styles that's noted by Chapman, and then show you one of my coins, which illustrates that particular depiction of Liberty. So let's just sort of jump through that, and I will insert a photo of each along the way, and really just an introduction to Chapman's book and to the 6 different head styles that Chapman identified nearly 100 years ago in his writing. So style 1, the head of Liberty in style and execution follows the obverse, the scent of the last issue of 1793. New larger punches were used for inscriptions and figures to the date. So these are going to be Chapman 1 through 4, which is Sheldon 17 through 20. And what we have right there is my Sheldon 17A in very high relief, not a heck of a lot of rim, but Liberty does stand up off the face of the coin quite nicely, and I'll show you a close-up of that. Style 2, entirely different style in lower relief, opening with specimen in a light, sketchy treatment struck with the reverse of number 1. Same figures with short, thick 4, top of which is generally blunt. This class progresses towards a rounder face in high relief and with very marked variations. That's going to be numbers 5 through 28 for Chapman, or 21 through 42 for Sheldon numbering. I've pulled out my Sheldon 24, which is the famous apple cheeks variety, and you can certainly see that there is a large transition in terms of style, a major transition in terms of style from the first to the second head. So let's take a close-up look at this. Style 3, new figures with long, larger 7 and tall pointed 4 at once differentiates this group in succeeding in detail from preceding. The heads are smaller and narrower, with the hair in 4 to 5 rolled locks over the ear, and the lowest curl above the same thickness as to those above it, and have full plump cheeks. The hair treated in minute detail so as to indicate that separate hair is particularly noticeable in number 32. These are going to be numbered 29 through 37 for Chapman. And that will be 43 to 51 for Sheldon. This is my Sheldon 51. You do see some significant changes. This is a short bust. The hairstyle is certainly different than what we had before. And I would say these are distinctly different. So let's look at a close-up of this one. Our 4th head style, largest heads, and in the later numbers of group and lowest relief of the series, especially across the neck, and with larger, wider, and longer mass of hair behind the neck than the preceding style, terminating in one heavy curl with a thick end. The last feature is continued in the next style. These are going to be Chapman numbered 38 to 46. That includes Sheldon 54 to 61, as well as 63. And I have pulled out my 63, one of my favorite coins, truly. And let's do our side by side. I would agree that we have an evolution. And yeah, look at the hair. And I don't necessarily observe the lower relief, but this 63 is kind of an oddball. It's the one outlier as far as the sequence goes. Chapman skips over 62, which incidentally we'll look at next, and puts that into this next section, which is a little bit chaotic, so let's talk about it. Headstyle 5, head in higher relief, the second die with a bold expression, with hair in 4 rolled locks over the ear, and the last or 5th die in a hard manner and hair in a heavy mass. The treatment presaging in the final style. These are numbers 47 to 52 for Chapman. That's going to be Sheldon 52 and 53, then jumping forward to 62, skipping 63, and going with 64 to 66. I've pulled out my Sheldon 62 here. It's a lovely example. And for comparison, I find these fairly similar, but certainly, you know, you can find some distinction between the two. Let's take a look at this one. And then Headstyle 6, which we all know as the head of 95, larger, broader head in a hard, inartistic style as continued in 1795. These are going to be Chapman 53 to 59, which are going to cover Sheldon 67 to 72. And I have pulled out the channel signature coin here, my Sheldon 69, which is just a fantastic coin. And let's take a closer look at that one. So that's just a quick introduction to Chapman's book. As you get further into it, he describes each one of the varieties. In text, there's really no plates to be had. I have not reviewed this entire book, but look at that. There's a letter from Eric Newman to Dennis Loring, who we are going to be speaking with in the near future. By the way, Dennis and I have been talking a little bit. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, look, we do have some plates in the back. Not the easiest to make out, but they are there. And this was an inexpensive book, something like 10 or 15 bucks. So well worth checking out, particularly if you are a 1794 specialist. I look forward to pouring through it in a little bit more detail, but wanted to show it off to you guys a little bit and thought it might be fun to take a look at these 6 different head styles that Chapman identifies and see how they compare to the Sheldon numbering system and deployment sequence. So interesting stuff. Looking forward to talking to you guys a little bit in the comments on this one. Thanks for checking it out, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.